Round and round we go, losing self-control. I keep telling myself, but I don't wanna let you know. Is this what we become? Strangers on the run, looking for something, chasing the sun. All those days, trying to find a place where you don't make them just be alone, be alone. All those nights, lying by your side, like it's a vibe, feeling it shine under your spotlight. Like it's a vibe under your spotlight. That's the way every day goes. Looking back, I know we started falling. We were falling in love, yeah. Took my heart and you rode off. Was I feeling never enough for you, baby? When you left me chasing you, chasing you. Trying to find a place where we can be alone. All those nights, lying by your side, like it's a vibe, feeling it shine under your spotlight. Like it's a vibe under your spotlight.
Okay, here we go. Hello and good morning and welcome to another live stream. This is Thursday, June 9th, and I'm going to try not to cough as much. Just right away, it starts. Man, okay. Anyway, today is week day 4 of week 4 of Digital Studies 101, the class that I'm teaching this summer at the University of Mary Washington. And yeah, I'm okay. I'm just still got some lingering cough. I've just got over COVID, so that's what the cough is from. Anyway, good morning. Good to see some of you online. Today, I'm going to continue what I started yesterday, which was how to build a web page. And for students in the class, what you're building is a web page where you're sharing the ideas and findings of your digital methodology research. So it's kind of a short essay presented in web page form, and I'm asking you to hand code the HTML to make this, web page. Get your ideas across as effectively as possible using images, media, and design. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the latter, design. So the video for yesterday is up on YouTube, of course, and you might find it useful to look at it this way. This is, I've added chapters, so you can click on different things for a particular topic or task that you're trying to accomplish. Might be helpful to do that. I do have the label up here for today, but there's a lot to cover with CSS. I'm not going to have as many individual steps and things and so on, but I will try to cover that as well as I can. So that I can go back later and add these chapter titles. Along those lines, I am going to be continuing to work on my fifth element page that I started yesterday, and I can do a lot of things to it, but I want to do what's helpful for you if you're trying to figure out things for your own web page. So if you have questions, if there's some design element that you would like to see or see me show you how to do, I'm happy to do that on the stream, or try to. Maybe I don't know how to do it, but I'll try to figure it out. And that would help me spend my time well, basically. I'm going to give you some stuff to get started with CSS. Hopefully you've already seen that in Codecademy and W3 Schools. Let me just show you that really quick. But if you're looking at this in terms of learning some CSS is such a big topic that it really helps to have a specific thing you're trying to do, and then try to figure that out, and then that's enough CSS for now, and then you can build on that later. Anyway, so if you're working through W3 Schools, this is the they have tons and tons of things here. You've got the Learn HTML series, and this gets you through this. I would say just kind of looking through this, if you can get through I don't know, images, tables, lists, maybe. Some of these you don't necessarily need, not really, honestly. I don't think you need to know about iframes really or JavaScript, but if you can get through the first several of these, you'll be good. And then there's the CSS lesson, which is a separate curriculum, and it does take you through CSS with a fair amount of detail. You really don't need to get that far into it, honestly. If you get to about here-ish, then through the box model-ish, you'll have plenty of CSS knowledge under your belt in order that you'll be able to use for your web page. So you certainly don't need to get all the way into all this stuff unless you really want to. There's a lot of fun you can have with CSS. For Codecademy, I think HTML and CSS are basically the same course, but let's take a look. I don't actually recall. I don't want to look at the actual thing. Let me see the syllabus here. So they do Intro to HTML and Semantic HTML. Okay. Maybe CSS is separate now. It used to be a course called HTML and CSS, so maybe they've split that up for some reason. Anyway, it's in here somewhere. Maybe let's find out. Okay, so the catalog, you've got, this is a nice interface. So probably under web development. So there's Learn HTML again, front-end engineering. This is pretty good. So this is maybe the one I was thinking of. It's build a website with HTML, CSS, and GitHub Pages. You're not using GitHub Pages for this, but at least the basics of it, HTML, CSS, responsive design, Flexbox, these are the things that could be useful for you. So, at least the first parts of it, HTML and CSS is probably a decent place to go. And it looks like you can do part of it for free, so, worth trying. Okay, so again, this is the Learn How to Build Websites syllabus or course or whatever they call it here in Codecademy if you want to keep learning that way. But of course, I'm going to be talking and showing you some things that I think should give you a pretty good start. So I'm going to mainly be doing that. As I always say, it's good to have different ways of learning something. Codecademy is great. W3 Schools is great. Plenty of other people are putting stuff on YouTube. So there are ways to find the help you need. And if you're not sure, of course, I'm your, if you're a student in the class, I'm your professor. So ask me for help if you want to figure something out. Okay, so that's our overall goal for today, is to design this web page. And CSS is the language that we use to accomplish design, and that's what we're going to get into shortly. Okay, so where's my window? I've lost one of my windows here. What's the next one? Okay, great. So let's get started with CSS. The first thing we need to do, of course, is open the web page, and I'll open the one I started yesterday. I wanted to start through this view of it to show you how to find your web page again, in case you did this. I mean, assuming you did things similarly to how I did, you might wonder, how do I find this again? Basically, two ways. You can go to the subdomains list and then click on the document root from here. That's probably the most direct path. Another thing you can do is just open the file manager. The drawback here is when you open the file manager, it opens at the top level of the file manager, like the top level of your server, and so you have to kind of find your subdomain, and so that means you have to know the name of it and you have to look for it. It's not too bad, of course, but you know, I have a ton of things, so I have to kind of sift through them. But either way, this is where you'll end up. You'll end up looking at the list of files and folders that make up your web page, and as you hopefully recall from yesterday, there are two so far. We've got one called webpage.html and another one called trends.jpg, and this is what the webpage HTML file looks like right now. It is using, or it is including the image trends.jpg, and you can see that here, the line graph, and otherwise it's just kind of raw vanilla HTML. Okay, so we're going to open this here and do some more to it. Remember, when you're editing HTML in here, don't use the HTML edit tool, use the just plain edit. This is the code editor. This is what I'd like for you to use. And this is where we ended up yesterday. So I can review just a little bit. There's a basic structure for HTML. It always has the opening and the closing parts. You've got the opening bit here, for example, for the head tag. The closing part here. Closing part always has a / in it, and almost like most of the tags, almost all of the ones we've seen so far have an opening part and a closing part, and they match. So opening title, opening head, closing head, opening body, closing body. You notice body opens after head closes, and there's nothing between the head and the body. There's no neck, I guess. So it just, I wonder what that would be. What would that be for if there was a neck tag? Anyway, we don't need that. So body and opens and closes. The only tag that's different is image, or img, and this is what is used to include an image. And for an image tag, all of the information that you provide to the web browser is going to be included in attributes. So that's another keyword here, attributes. src is an attribute, width is an attribute, height is an attribute. These are different properties of this tag that you are defining by saying source equals trends.jpg, width equals 511, height equals 282. These are the values that you are assigning to those properties, which are named in those HTML attributes. I'm kind of reviewing some of the terminology, using some of the terminology here to review it. Hopefully that's starting to stick a little bit and make sense to you. Okay, so this is all HTML so far, and I kind of went over that syntax again because I'm about to introduce a whole new type of syntax, a whole new type of pattern for writing some code, and this is a different kind of code. It's a different language, but it is a language that is built on top of HTML, and it uses some of the same terminology, but it looks really different, and so that's why it takes, it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time explaining it. So in the head, there's actually several ways you can include CSS code or apply CSS code to a web page, but I'm going to be doing it this way because it's easier to see it all at once. Normally you would have a separate file that contains all your CSS code. That's how I would normally do it. But for now, it's easier just to put it inside of the head of this single web page because this is probably your only HTML document. The advantage of having a separate CSS file is that you can use that same CSS file to apply to hundreds of HTML pages, and that saves you a lot of time and energy having to write all that. You don't have to write it all. You just write it one place and then link those files together. In this case, though, we're going to write the CSS here. All right, so this is the easiest way to do it, I think. So this is, first of all, a style tag, and this style tag goes inside the head, right? So we open the head here, close the head here, and the style tag opens and closes inside of the head. And this is going to be where we can write some CSS code. Now, what is CSS code? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it does, the cascade refers to how it applies styles, and the main concept there is inheritance. So a element has parents, right? So if you think of the sites tag here, its immediate parent is h1, its grandparent is body. So tags automatically have this sort of hierarchical, almost familial kind of relationship to each other, and they will inherit certain properties from their parents, and they will pass certain properties on to their descendants. And that concept is really key to understanding how to apply CSS. That's why it's called cascading style sheets. But the style sheet is a more important, I think, easier concept to get. Style sheet just means like it's a list of styles. It's an explanation of how certain things should look on your web page. Right now, I don't have any style sheets applied, so the only styles being applied are just the default styles built into the web browser. And the web browser knows, like, okay, this is an H1 text, so I'm going to make it twice as big as everything else with a bold typeface. The typeface is just the default typeface for the operating system, and it's probably Times New Roman, probably on this one, probably on yours as well. Times New Roman is the default font. It's a serif font, which means it has those little feet at the beginning and end of the letters, top and bottom usually. And it's just the normal default typeface. It looks kind of boring, honestly. So one of the things we're going to do, and we can do with CSS, is say, I would like this to look different. And I can create a set of rules that will make it look different whenever someone views it. Okay, so back to CSS. So this is where we actually can write some CSS code. So this is now between line 9 and 12 for me. As long as I stay in here, that's not code yet, but as long as I stay in here, I can write CSS, and it has different rules, and CSS has pretty specific rules. HTML is a little bit flexible in some cases. You can do things different ways and get the same result. CSS, as far as the syntax at least, you really have to follow the rules for CSS syntax or else it's going to break. So it does have a few more things you have to remember, but once you remember it, it's fine. Like there's a single kind of dominant pattern, and then once you get that pattern, everything else kind of falls into place after that. So I'm going to give you first the pattern, okay? So this is not actual code yet, this is just the pattern with the name of certain parts of the pattern filled in place of them. So the first bit is what's called a selector. And then I'll give you a real example in a moment, but this is like a fake example, so don't copy this really. The first bit is called a selector, and then you have an opening curly bracket like that. And then I usually like to get a couple lines so I can have some room to work here. And then within the selector block, that's what's defined by these two curly brackets. Within this block, I have a series of statements, and these are a series of statements setting properties to assigning certain values to whatever properties. You can have as many as you want in here, as many as you need to in order to define it, but they always follow that syntax where it's property, colon, value, semicolon, property, colon, value, semicolon, property, colon, value, semicolon. The same pattern over and over and over again. If you miss a semicolon, that's going to cause problems because it's going to try to interpret the rest of this as the value for that property, and then it's not going to make sense and it's not going to work the way you expect it to. It's not going to destroy your web page, but it might cause pretty serious display errors that would be hard to understand, or might make your content invisible or something. Like there's all kinds of problems that can happen. So you always want to have that pattern. And if you're asking me for help with your CSS, that's the first thing I'm going to look for is, are all your semicolons there? It's really easy to accidentally put a colon at the end of a line. That causes the same problems as not having anything there. So you always have to have that semicolon at the end of lines. Other programming languages, by the way, also end lines in semicolons. So this is a pretty familiar pattern across other languages. Perl requires the semicolons. In JavaScript, they're optional, but I still like to do that out of habit, actually. So it's something that you'll see over and over again once you start writing code. Okay, so property value, property value, property value. So this is the pattern. So here's another pattern. Remember, HTML has the ability to write comments. So these are things where you can write something that won't actually be interpreted as HTML, but it's still there in your source code in case you want to see it. And that's what it looks like. CSS also has syntax for making some part of what you've written a comment, and that means that the web browser is not going to try to interpret it. I mean, I can try this right now, by the way, and nothing's going to happen. It's not going to cause any errors. It's just not going to interpret that. But this little bit I have here, this is not really this is not really code. So I'm going to mark it out as a comment using the comment syntax for CSS. So that's a / and then an asterisk at the beginning of what you want to make a comment, and then an asterisk and a / at the end of what you want to make a comment. So that's how you set off a comment. By the way, this is kind of a neat little, I don't know, pro tip or something, but in this editor and quite a few others, there's a little shorthand you can use on your keyboard to mark out something as a comment. So let's say it works in both HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever context I found it seems to work. So let's say, for example, I wanted to comment out this line 27. It's the HTML part of my document. If I do Control/, it just automatically applies the correct comment syntax around everything in that line. I can do Control/ again to undo the comment. So pretty neat little trick you can do. When you're, if you forget what the comment syntax is, or you have a whole bunch of lines, like you can do a whole bunch of lines all at once, and it'll do that for every line as you go. And that's a really quick way to turn off and on big chunks of your code if you want to. So just a little pro tip there. That was Control/, or it's might be Command/ on a Mac. A lot of keyboard stuff. I just have like muscle memory for it, so I'm trying to remember what I do on a Mac. But anyway, that's you don't have to do it that way. You can just type it. Okay, let's actually do something. So the selector part of the, do I have another? Nope, I don't. Okay. Yeah, you know what? Actually, we'll do background. I'll talk about background because the background is a pretty obvious thing, and it's very easy to see immediately, did my CSS actually work? So I'm going to try some actual CSS now, and my goal is going to be to change the background here. So right now the background is white. I would like to make this something else. And if you have a color you'd like me to make this, then let me know either in the Twitch chat or the live stream chat channel in Discord. But first I need to go back here. And so the first part of it, remember the selector is the first part of my CSS block. That's going to determine which part of the document do I want to apply some property value to. And if I want to affect everything that you see on the page, everything that you see on the page is inside of the body tag, right? The body tag is the visible part of the document. So to change everything you say, that's what you need to select with the first, with the selector here. And you notice the syntax here, right? It's opening colon, closing, opening curly bracket, closing curly bracket, left, right. Everything I write now here is going to be a property value pair that's going to apply to the, the background here. So let's see what that looks like. So at this point, when you want to do something, sometimes you need to know the name of the property that you're trying to change. Like in this case, I'm trying to change the background. And so how do I do that? How do I figure out the background? So I find it helpful with W3 Schools if you click on a particular thing, right? So this actually took me down to the advanced section for some reason. But you've got a lot of different things you can do to the background. And if you scroll down here, you can see that there's quite a bit that you can do, and they're all kind of listed out here. The properties are actually named at the bottom of each of these tutorial pages. So like this is just background, but you can also do background clip, background image, background origin, background size. There's a few others actually that I like. Background attach is another one. But there's different things you can do, but we don't need them. We just need to know what is the basics here. And this is a way that you can apply a number of different values to a background. But that's a little complicated, so let's keep it simpler for now and just deal with background color. Now, I mean, I've done this enough that I know this one off the top of my head, but it's okay to look these up as well. Let's see, is there an easier kind of way to look things up in here? Maybe it's just under CSS properties. Maybe that's how they decided to do it. Yeah, I mean, you can see these other ones, right? So here, how did I get here? So see, it's CSS reference. So it's references, CSS reference. Okay, that's what I was kind of thinking of. This is where you can see a list of all of the properties that are possible in CSS. So if you're trying to think of what something is called, then there's a good chance it's on this page and you can look it up here. And that's what I do. All right, but I do know background color off the top of my head. I want to change the backgrounds and I want to give it a different color. So conveniently enough, the property that I'm interested in changing is named background-color. Property names are always hyphenated if they have multiple words in them, as opposed to like in JavaScript, it's conventional to do things with camel case like that if they have multiple words, but that's not CSS. In CSS, it's background-color. And you can see it turns light blue. That's the editor here telling me with color blanking on the term for that, syntax highlighting, that this is the correct way to type that. If you misspell it, it'll turn black because it just thinks, oh, this is text. But if you type it correctly, it's like, oh, this is a property, and it's going to color it that way. Okay, so I need to set this to a different color. I haven't seen any suggestions yet, so I'll just come up with something. Color in CSS and HTML is its own thing. It can be quite complicated. You've got lots of different things, but the straightforward thing to do is just to come up with the name of a color that you want it to turn into. So let's try a couple. Let's see what pink looks like. I'll just type the word pink. And there is a number of colors that you can just name. There's like 200 or so. And CSS will recognize that. It's like, oh, that's a color I know, pink. So let's see what pink looks like. I'm guessing it looks terrible. Okay, so not as terrible as I thought. That's actually kind of a lighter, gentler pink than I expected. But, it shows me that it worked. I mean, the main thing is I can see like, oh, I did something, and then I refreshed the page, and it did something. The page looks different now. So, background color pink. Let's try a different color. Background color blue. Save changes. Over here. Refresh. I'm doing Control R to refresh. And there you can see blue. And this is a particular shade of blue that's pretty vibrant, pretty saturated, and also pretty hard on the eyes, because the black text on this blue background is already kind of hurting my eyes, and I don't care for that. So I want something different. Let's try light blue. And in this case, there's no hyphen, just light blue as though it's a single word. And okay, this is better. I mean, I can read this. This is still, the black text on the blue background is still a little hard to read, but not as bad. And I would probably accept that as a decent amount of contrast between those two. But you can get much more specific, right? I mean, this is a particular shade of light blue. Maybe it's not the shade you were thinking of, or maybe that shade of pink isn't vibrant enough, and you want to think about how can I make this, even more vibrant, or whatever it is. Thankfully, there are ways that you can specify any color, essentially, among a range of potentially millions of different shades and hues. But you have to define it. So let's see if they have anything here on W3 Schools. Might be here under HTML. Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, tomato, that's a good color. I like that one. So I said 200 a minute ago. It looks like there actually are only 140 named colors you can just name. But if you'll see on this W3 Schools page, you see the name of the color, like Alice Blue, and then underneath that there's a hex code. It looks like a hashtag, but this is just it's not a hashtag. This is a hex code, and these hex codes are ways to define a color. And what it's telling me is that this is a color named Bisque, and this is another named Blue Violet. And these are then these are ways that I can see, okay, how is that being defined? Like actually, like what is the color of pale green or papaya whip? Or that's not one I would have thought of, papaya whip. Or Peru. Peru is CD853F. That's the color. That's how you mix up the color Peru. If you were thinking of it as like paint, that's how that would work. So these are, lots of different colors. Orange, red is kind of nice. So, but maybe you want to tweak it just a little bit, right? So maybe you think, well, I like medium sea green, but maybe I want to go a little lighter than that, but not quite as light as medium spring green. So you can go in here and actually, pick it out. W3 Schools looks like it gives us a tool to do that with, and you can look at different hex codes that are in the same neighborhood as this one. This is probably the easiest thing to do, is just find one you like and then click on it, and then you'll get the hex value for it. You can also, though, play with it yourself just by changing some of these values. So let's say 93D5B1. Okay. It always has to have the hash mark in front of it to indicate that this is a color. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, pretty decent, but I think I want to go lighter than that. So with these colors, it's kind of hard to look at this and be like, oh, I know what color that is. I couldn't do that. But these are numbers in a hexadecimal range. Our normal numbering system that we're used to is a decimal number system. That means you go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you go 10 times, and then it rolls over to the next digit. Then it's 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then 2, 0, 1. It goes on a period of 10. Hexadecimal systems go on a period of 16. So they go from, instead of 0 to 9, they go from 0 to F. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. And then you start over again at the next digit. It's a more efficient way to store information, and that hexadecimal notation is everywhere in computing once you get under the hood a little bit. And in colors, what we're saying is 0 is, all zeros is black, so that's 6 zeros. Show you what black looks like. So obviously black on black isn't legible, but you can see the effect there. All Fs, 6 Fs is going to be all white. So anything between those two is going to be different. If they're all the same, it's going to be a color of gray. So let's do 999999. That's still going to be pretty dark gray. Or you can adjust each of the colors in each of the primary colors individually. So, well, not primary technically, because it's red, blue, wait, RGB. Sorry, red, green, blue. So the first two are red, the second two are green, and the final two are blue. So if we turn the red all the way up with FF, and we turn the green all the way down, and we turn the blue all the way up, or let's say most of the way up like this with 99, we should get a decent shade of purple. Okay, or kind of a, I don't know, I would call that a vivid mauve color, I guess. I don't know. That's really intense. I kind of like that, but I would not use this as the background for a page. So that's kind of like a hot pink, actually. Sometimes the results are a little unpredictable. Okay, so let's do, but let's go all the way blue just to see. That's more purple. That's more what I expected. So these are ways you can play with these different values directly if you want. But honestly, it's usually easier just to look something up. There's this website. It's kind of spammy sometimes, but there's this Color Lovers is a place to find nice palettes, like color palettes, colors that go well together. And there are different palette generators you can find, but I like Color Lovers because these are like created by people and curated by people, and so you can sort of follow people you like, or you can favorite a color and then see it in different palettes, and you can see much more subtle kinds of colors. Like this person named this one Strawberry Candy Pop, and that kind of works. I mean, that kind of makes sense to me when I see this color. And then you can see, like, are people using this in other palettes? And you can see all these different palettes where that color appears. And these are going to be a little bit more varied and interesting than what you can see from automatic palette generators. Anyway, so there's another way to indicate color too that you might see, which is the RGB just numeric system. So this is also worth talking about here. Let's say if we want to do that one. I copied this to my clipboard so that I can paste it in here and show you. This one, it's RGB, lowercase, and then in parentheses, how much red you want, how much green you want, and how much blue you want. And that goes on a scale from 0 to 255 for each of those. So let me save that, and then this will be that strawberry color. So in this case, they gave you just the three numbers, 217, 69, and 128, but then you have to put that in parentheses after the lowercase RGB for that to work for that color. Okay, so so far this is all the CSS I've done, and my page does look pretty different so far, but I do want to do some other things to it as well. Let's see what else is on my next slide here. Oh yeah, well, I've been talking about color for a bit. I've applied that to the background, but let's say I want to change something else. I don't want to just have black text on this Strawberry Candy Pop background. It's a little dark, by the way. I would probably want to go lighter, but I'm just demonstrating today. So let's find a color that might go with that, actually. Okay, that's kind of an interesting one. This sort of lightish yellowish color. What do they call this one? They don't give it a name. It's just F2AA. Okay, I kind of like that one. So what would that look like if the text was in that color? I'm thinking it's going to be too harsh, but I want to try it and see. So let's apply a different change here and see if we can make that look, make that work. Now you might be thinking, okay, so the background color is set using a property called background-color. It might make sense to use a different property, text-color, to change the color of the text. But in fact, you don't. It's just the word color by itself. And you can see the color and the syntax highlighting over here changed to show you that color is the right property, not foreground color or text color. So I'll set that to this. And let's see. Okay, yeah, that's too bright. I mean, the contrast here isn't great, but I can see it, and it did apply the change that I wanted. It's pretty harsh. I'm not a fan of it, but it proves the point. It gets the point across. Okay, so that's how you change the color of the text. It's the property name color. Now, so far I only have this one CSS declaration, which is applying these rules to the body. And if you notice, I've got all these other tags here: h1, p, img, and site. All of these are showing you they have the same background, they have the same foreground color as every other element. That's because they're all inheriting those rules from their ancestor body. Body is the parent. All of the descendants will have those different colors. Let's say I wanted to make the heading, in this case H1, a different color than the rest of the text. You want to be careful with this kind of change, but because you can introduce too much like visual chaos by changing the colors like this arbitrarily. But I want to show you the concept of selection in CSS and how you can change different elements individually. Okay, so let's make that, oh, this is going to look bad. Let's make this that light blue color. So this is H7D9FF. So in this case now, I only want to change one part of this, which is the H1 heading in this document. I'm going to make it this blue color. This is going to look terrible. I don't recommend this as a design choice, but just to prove a point. Okay, so now the selector is, instead of body, because body selects the entire document that you can see, now I'm going to select just part of this document using the selector, and the selector H1 just says it corresponds to the H1 tag. Just like body as a selector corresponded to the body tag, H1 corresponds to the H1 tag. And it's only going to apply whatever I put here to that. So there's my color property. There's the hex value that I want to apply, H7D9FF. Save the change. And there you go. So it's okay, I guess. I don't know, but it's working, which is what I wanted to see. So that's how you deal with color. Now you might notice I guess I should talk about this too. So the link is still the default. It's like this purple color because I've already visited that color, that link. Links by default will be blue at first, and then they'll turn purple after you've clicked on them. They'll also turn red when you click on them. Those are the default colors for links in most browsers, and so that's what you'll see. You can change that too. You shouldn't do too much with this, and I think that sometimes designers get carried away making links look either too subtle or too over the top. But you can definitely do it. I don't know if I want to get into that though, because it involves pseudo classes. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to do it. So, right? No one can stop me. So this is what we're going to do. So for a link, it's A, and this is going to select every link on the page. I just have one, but this will be a set of rules that apply to multiple ones. In fact, maybe I can also link to other things. I'm going to make another link here because I want to show you what it would look like if a link has not been visited versus visited. So I want to make another link here. Remember, href equals and then the destination you want to link to. I need to think of a website that I don't have a recent link to. I could just make one up, I guess. Just do example.com. So that's just another link because I want to show you that links have two different states. So they're purple after being visited. They're this blue before you visit them. And you can change both of those states of links using what's called a pseudo class. So A is going to define what color should a link be, and we'll just say the same color as the rest of the text for now. Okay. All right, so that's, one design choice you can make. I don't really recommend it because I think you should make them stand out more. Like they should be standing out in a slightly more visible way. Right now, they're underlined, and that might be good enough. In some cases, I would argue that it also should be a different color. So let's change it to a different color, and let's find a color from here. Oh, this is like a darker, like a different blue than the H1. I don't know. I don't really like that. That purple's pretty good. What about that one? So that dark purple is called Aragon 1. So let's try Aragon 1 here for my links. Okay, that doesn't look very good because it is kind of blending into the background a bit. But I'm not going to deal with like actually picking good colors right now. I want to show you how to make the changes. So you remember there are at least 3 different states of a link that we know about. There's the default state, there's the state after you visited it, There's also a hover state. Whenever you hover over a link, you can actually change that too. So it makes sense we can define all of them. So each of these is going to have its own selector. So a link is the default state of a link. A visited is after you visited it. A active is after you've clicked on it. And a hover is when you're hovering over it. Notice I'm indicating these with a colon. So here's the A, and then this is going to apply a particular, this is called a pseudo class, to change something about an A element only in that particular situation. So let's say I want to make the color, I want to make these white instead. Let's do color for visited links. Let's make them gray. Or let's make them silver. How about that? And then for active, let's just make it the same as the default. And then for fun, let's make the hover change color. So let's make the color for here, make it take on that Aragon color that we got a minute ago. All right, so now this is going to apply a change to several different states. So the main thing I want to show you is like you can change the way it acts when you hover over it, which can be fun. I like to sometimes change not just one thing, which is the color, but also change two things. So you can do that here. So they are underlined by default. So let's take away the underline when we hover over it. So text hyphen decoration is the property that we can change. And I think it's just normal. Yeah, by default it's underlined, but if you say normal, that's going to override the underline in this situation. Let's see. Am I forgetting something? Is it not normal? Really, it's none. I think it's just none. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So you can see the underline goes away. You can do the opposite and have the underline only appear when you hover over it. You can change a whole bunch of different properties of it at any point, you know, if you feel like it within the hover thing. You don't have to do any of this, of course. This is just how you would do that if you wanted to. Okay, so that's quite a bit about color and links. Let's talk about fonts, because that's an important thing that you should probably want to change about your layout. I'm going to continue working on this one. I should note, by the way, that I no longer consider what I have here a good example of web design. I think it's already off the rails visually, but I'm going to keep going just to kind of show you how to build these things. When you are designing your own page, you should make sure you make good choices. Make choices that actually make sense and make your content stronger and easier to understand, right? Okay, so by default, your text is probably in Times New Roman. That's what we're looking at here. And that's what the H1 is in, that's what the body is in, the paragraph is in, everything's going to be Times New Roman. If you're not sure, by the way, something you can do to figure out what fonts you're using or what colors something are is with the element inspector. So in Chrome and Firefox, at least if you right click on it, I know you can't see my pop-up here, but if I right click on this, I get a pop-up and I have an option in my pop-up menu that says inspect. And I think it says inspect element or element inspector in Firefox. And if I click that, it will pop up the developer tools. You can also access the developer tools in Chrome if you click on the three dots menu at the top, and then you go to more tools and then developer tools. I know you can't see it, but it's in there. It's also Control-Shift-I if you're on Windows. And this is the set of developer tools. It pops up in the bottom of your browser, and it can tell you a lot about the website you're looking at. If it's your own website, it'll help you develop and double check things and troubleshoot things. If it's someone else's website and you're wondering how they did something, you can pull this up and see, okay, how did they do that? Like, what color is that? What is the CSS that applies to that? And you can see it, like you can see the code right here. The nice thing is you can kind of work your way through the document, which is helpful, especially when you get into layouts, because you can try to navigate the different elements that you're looking at. So here's the H1, and it'll show you kind of the pieces of it, the P and so on. Okay, so, but you can see that let's check so it's telling you the rendered fonts. I don't know if you can see it, but it's telling you the rendered font way at the bottom right there, bottom right, way down there. It says Times New Roman, which is what I expected. It tells you what font it's going to be rendered in. Now, if we want to make this a different font, we can tell it. So let me show you how to do that. So remember, I just want to change, let's say the H1 right now, so we can compare and contrast. Okay. So fonts are technically software for rendering a typeface. And there are a number of typefaces that are familiar that every computer, you can count on pretty much every computer to have on them. And the quickest way to change the fonts is to tell the web browser to use one of those well-known fonts that it probably already has somewhere on its system. So font, this is how you define it. So it's a property called font family. So font-family. And what you're going to define next is a list of fonts to look for, a list of fonts to look for by name. So you have to know the names of these, but they're not that many to remember. So and they're covered, I'm sure, in W3 Schools at some point in here. But there's a standard set of about 7 or 8 fonts that you can count on almost every computer to have, and I'll show you what some of them look like. But the big thing to keep in mind with fonts is serif versus sans serif. And if I'm designing a page, I like to have some contrast between my headings and my paragraphs. And one easy way to get some good contrast is to have one of them be a serif font and one be a sans serif font. Sans serif means that it's not going to have the little curly cues at the end of the letters. So let's say I want to make my headings sans serif, which is often what I want to do. So first of all, I'm going to say look for a font called Helvetica. Helvetica is a very popular font, very common. Let's see if this works. I don't think it will. Oh, it actually did. Interesting. So what's interesting about this is that it actually worked, but it didn't fully work. Let me complete the image tag, the CSS here, and I'll show you why this is interesting. So what I've told it initially is look for a font called Helvetica. And then I can say, if you can't find Helvetica, then try something else. Try Arial instead. And if you can't find Arial, then try Verdana. And if you can't find Verdana, then just pick any sans serif font you feel like. And that's what that means. So it's saying, it's going in order. So it's saying your first choice is Helvetica, your second choice is Arial, your third choice is Verdana. Arial and Verdana are other sans serif fonts, and Helvetica is the one I really wanted, but I'm okay with Arial. I don't mind Arial. In fact, what is interesting, and what I noted here as interesting, is that this is not Helvetica. And so I was surprised to see that my computer understood that I wanted Helvetica and it offered Arial as the closest. So this is Arial, and this is not Helvetica. But it gave me Arial as a fallback already without me telling it, which I think is interesting. Arial is on Windows computers, Helvetica is on a Mac, and you can buy it and install it on your Windows computer if you want, but I have not done that here. There are some telltale things about them. The biggest one, if you look at like the top of a lowercase t, you can see the top of a lowercase t on Arial is sloped like that, or if you look at a capital C, the over here, the C looks like a Pac-Man mouth on Arial. For Helvetica, those are all squared off. So the C, the ends of the line for C comes into a square, and the top of a T is leveled off at the top for Arial. The A looks a little bit more rectangular for Arial. Other little telltales like that. And overall, I think Helvetica is a superior font. I think Helvetica looks a lot better than Arial, but it's good enough. Okay, so that's a sans serif family of fonts. You could also do, I'll comment that one out. You could also do some other serif fonts. Let's say, let's start with Georgia. And if you can't find Georgia, then maybe Palatino. And then if you can't find Palatino, then just do Times New Roman. If you can't find Times New Roman for whatever reason, then just say, pick any serif font you feel like. But let's see what Georgia looks like. So Georgia is another serif font, but the serifs are a little bit more blocky, a little bit more like roundy sometimes, like at the bottom of the Y. So it has a slightly wider letter than Times New Roman. Looks pretty nice. I like Georgia sometimes. Okay, so that's a standard kind of serif font. There are others. So let's say, so another popular font is Impact. Impact is interesting. You will recognize it. Impact is the font that is almost always used in image memes. And you can see it's kind of hard to read because the letters are so big and close together, especially when it's in a bold weight, which is what it is in an H1. Impact is not good for a paragraph. So let me show you what it looks like in a paragraph. So let me create a selector called P for the paragraph, and I'll give that the font family Impact and show you how bad that looks. Yeah, it's not easy to read. I don't recommend it. It might be good for headings sometimes, but use it cautiously. Basically, it's a pretty intense font, as the name impact suggests. It looks okay for certain things, but not usually for text if you want it to be a paragraph worth of text. Okay, so these are the built-in fonts. And I mean, there's others. I guess it's worth kind of adding a couple more. Comic Sans is pretty famous. Do I not? Maybe I don't even have Comic Sans on here. Comic Sans is in the category of cursive, so sometimes you can use cursive as the way to invoke it. There it is. I wonder why it didn't show up initially. Maybe it's hyphenated. But there's Comic Sans. Comic Sans gets a bad reputation. I don't think it's terrible. I do think it is bad for comic lettering. I don't recommend using it if you're actually creating comics. But in some places it looks kind of like, okay-ish handwriting, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Other fonts I think are more problematic, like Papyrus. I really don't recommend Papyrus for anything. So there's a pretty famous SNL skit about the font Papyrus. And I get it. I mean, I get the critiques of it. I don't care for Papyrus. So these are the fonts that are built into your system. I have a Windows system. You'll have a slightly different set on a Mac, mainly Helvetica, but it's pretty good to see what these options are. There's a bunch more. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about fonts, but a lot of times you want to use a particular font, and you want to make sure that the font that you've chosen actually appears in your design. And so there is a nice way to do that, a couple ways, but a way to do that I like is Google Fonts. This is a hosted web font system that you can use. So you've got hundreds of fonts here, 1,424 fonts that you can choose from. Some of these are pretty different. Some of them are pretty normal. So Oswald is kind of like a lighter weight impact, and it works pretty well. It's very, very narrow. Roboto, there's a whole family of things in the Roboto group, and Noto, another family of fonts that look pretty good together. So if you find one here that you really like, you can use it. I do like Roboto Slab, although I'm a little sick of it. I use Merriweather a lot. Let's find another. Oh, what's a good one? I like Lobster. Lobster's a fun one because it looks pretty intense. Like you would not use this for, Lobster 2, look at that. That's pretty. Let's do this one. So it's kind of a cursive font, kind of like I don't know, you might see this on a sticker or something. Not in text, like you wouldn't want a whole paragraph of this, but as the title, maybe this works. I don't know. But let me show you how to use it, and then you can decide if you want to use this one or some other one. Okay, so it's telling me that for this font, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 different styles, which is good. So there's a regular weight, straight up and down, and then italic, and then there's a bold weight, also with an italic. It's not that it leans, it actually is in a cursive. The italic is more cursive, basically. That's what's different there. So I'm going to actually select all of these. I'll just click the buttons here. And, okay, fine. I'm going to add, I can't see all these. It keeps popping out. So I'm going to add all of them to my thing. And then these are all selected now. And then what it does is it generates the code that you need to include this in your design. So you've got it right here. You can just copy it, or you can move it somewhere else. Since we're in CSS land, right? Since I'm in this CSS block here, I think cleanest way to do it is using the @import option. So click over here, and then you'll see some styles. And you'll see that if you look closely, you'll notice that what's written over here on the right looks a lot like what I've already got. And there's a style tag at the beginning, style tag at the end. If you want this, all you have to do is copy it, but don't copy the style tags. You already have that. Just copy the CSS part of it and put that at the top here, and that's what it should look like. So this is importing all of the Lobster 2 software that it needs to render something using the Lobster 2 font. I'm just going to save that and refresh. I haven't used that font anywhere yet, so I don't see it, but it is now loaded in the web page's memory, and it's available for me to use here. It does not already have to be installed on my computer. It'll just show up here as long as I name it in my font family. Let me just double check how they want me to do that. Okay, yeah, it's just Lobster 2. And we'll see what it looks like in my design. Okay, that's not terrible. I don't love it, but it's not terrible. There's some really interesting ligatures over here, like the way the I and the F and the T kind of flow together. I really like the look of that. But it's not super readable, so I don't know. But it's a pretty neat little font. So that's how you can change it, basically, the Google font system. And there's a ton in here. I would say explore these, but don't go nuts, because there are some that are very unusual looking and will make your content hard to read. Ultimately, your goal is to make your content as legible as possible. Okay, that's a bit about fonts. Let me talk about layout, and I think this will be my last major concept. I'm still interested in requests. If there's anything that you'd like for me to cover today, this will be my last live stream of the week, so this is your chance to see this on the live stream. Let me know, but otherwise I'm going to move into talking about layout and then wrap things up after that. So let's do some layout. Now, again, a lot of this website now is pretty ugly. I'm not going to deal with the color right now. But if I zoom back out to normal size, you can see one issue with the readability of this. And that is that the content right now basically goes all the way from the left side way over to the right side. And it's this thin little ribbon of text across the top. Not very readable. Also, what's an issue for readability, of course, is that I've got the paragraph here in impact at the moment. Let me change that back, because that's actually quite hard to read. Let's switch it back to times. And, that's, better, but still, it's a lot. It's a lot visually to go left and right for a screen this wide. Would be fine on your phone probably, but on a desktop, no good. So what we want to do is start getting some control over where the different elements actually appear. Until you tell it otherwise, elements like H1, paragraph, H2, image, they're going to take up as much room as they can. They're going to go fully left to right unless you tell it otherwise. For the image, I told it not to go full left and right, because I told it actually only go over 511 pixels. So that's the size of that image tag. You can set sizes for every other element. CSS layout can be very complicated, and there are several different schools of thought and paradigms to consider implementing. I'm not going to go into all that. I'm just going to give you a simple thing that'll work. But if you want to look into this some more, it's pretty interesting, I think. It sort of starts with the box model that helps you hopefully helps you understand like how elements are related to each other. You can get into CSS positioning. Floats is kind of the traditional, what I would say at this point, the traditional way to arrange content in relation to each other. A more modern way is using the Flexbox system, which I don't know if they even have this. Yeah, there it is. The Flexbox system is superior to floats and a lot easier to manage, but it's a more abstract concept. So if you want to do complex layouts, I would say check out Flexbox, but just bear in mind that it's going to be, you kind of have to already understand the box model before you can see what's so great about the Flexbox. But this is a relatively new thing, so not all browsers support it, but it looks like they do now. I mean, these are all, none of you are going to have browsers older than this, so that should be fine. But that's where you go with layout. But let me give you something simple and kind of old school in terms of content layouts, and that should be good enough for now. Okay, so basically all I want to do is say, instead of going fully left and fully right, let's make this a narrower column of text. And just to kind of show you how bad this might be, let's get a lot more text and let's see what that would look like. So lorem ipsum is, actually instead of lorem ipsum, I've got some text over here, right? I've got the full text of Wuthering Heights in a text document just right nearby. So let me put that all into in here. So I'll put this all into a single paragraph tag, all of Wuthering Heights. And this will actually illustrate another point, by the way. So this is now 12,000 lines long, and you'll see that even though it's 12,000 lines long, it's all one single paragraph. And when we look at it in source code visually, we can see there are multiple paragraphs here. Let me just save that. But because there are not multiple p tags, HTML is not going to consider this a separate paragraph from this. It's just going to run it all together in one giant block. So let's see how terrible that looks. Yeah, there it is. So that's all of Wuthering Heights, in one gigantic wall of text. So obviously you don't want that. Instead, you actually see another error here, which I'll get to in a second. But instead of this, if you want paragraphs, you actually have to put p tags around each thing that you want to be a paragraph. Yeah, I don't want to deal with that right now, because you kind of have to go through the whole thing and do it. So that's good enough for now. One thing I wanted to call your attention to, though, and I think I can fix this, is you see all these weird characters in here, like these, like it's sort of a A with a grave accent and then like a euro sign. These are character encoding errors. So what used to be here was probably a single curly quote, like a directional quotation mark, and very likely it's not being recognized because the web browser doesn't know which character set to use. And I'm gonna have to look up the code for this because I forget it off. This is one that I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe this one actually has it. Oh, interesting. Okay, this is cool. It's actually introducing semantic quotes in here. This is the best way to do it. But I think, so what I'm looking for is character set. And I'm trying to remember the syntax for it. Where is it? It's a meta, no, maybe it's a meta tag, not character. Maybe it's not its own tag. Hang on. That's what I'm looking for. Meta char set equals character set equals UTF-8. I think this will actually just fix all that. But usually I don't type things with those curly things, so I don't usually do this for my own stuff, but let's see if that'll fix that. Oh, it did. Okay, good. So now you can see, for example, that was actually an M dash right there that I was looking at earlier, I think. M dash is also a special character. Special characters are any characters that fall outside of the ASCII range. So there's a standard range of about 140 characters that you can use, and then if you go beyond that, the computer has to use a bigger number to encode it, and it runs out of space, and then it just guesses, and then you end up with those weird characters. But if you say use UTF-8 for the encoding instead of ASCII, UTF-8 has access to the millions of characters in the Unicode set, and so it's going to include all those. That was a very shorthand explanation of something very complicated, but hopefully that's good enough. Just basically, for getting weird characters like that, add this line of code, meta characters char set equals UTF-8. I probably should have done that to begin with. Okay, what was I doing? Layout. Okay, so as you can see, I'm not going to deal with actually breaking this into multiple paragraphs, but it's a gigantic wall of text. I want to make this a narrower wall of text. That's hard to say. And that's something I can accomplish pretty quickly. So let's go down here and do this. All right, so basically all I'm going to do is shove everything into a central column and give you some breathing room left and right around this. And that's going to be good enough for layout. That's what, if you remember Elsa's example I showed you yesterday, that's what she did. So I'll do this kind of the old-fashioned way, using a div. And a div is a blank, it's a block. So div stands for like division or divide. It just means a chunk of your document. And I'll just put one at the beginning. I'll open it at the beginning, and I'll go all the way down to the end, and I'll close it just before the body closes. So it's now a div that contains everything inside of the body. There's the body, and then there's a div just inside the body. And what I'm going to do is because I want everything on the page to be affected. I want to apply things to all this, and yet there is still going to be some room outside of it, and that's what the body tag does. So here's a div, and because I might have other divs on this document at some point, div is a generic element, I need to give this some specificity so I can refer to it in my CSS. So I'm going to give this an ID, and this is an attribute, so ID equals, and then in quotes, the attribute that I want to, the value that I want to assign to this attribute. ID is a special attribute, but it's something for private use. So I'm going to define it here, and then I just need to use it by the name that I define here. There's no kind of overarching or pre-existing set of values that are possible for IDs. But the way there is a difference, though. There's also an attribute called class, and a class, you can have multiple classes per element. You can have multiple instances of that class throughout the document. But for IDs, that's where when you just have one of something, this is when you want to use an ID instead of a class. So I'm going to say ID, I'll call it article, and save this here. Okay, so that's just creating some structure that I can reference in CSS, but I haven't applied any rules for that yet, so it's not actually making any difference, but it's now giving me something I can add some difference to. Okay, so back in my CSS block, so now I can go up here, I'm inside the style tag, and I can add some things here. Let's see. How come I can't delete that comment? See, somebody just added a spam comment here for me, and I don't have the button that I usually have to delete it. Wait a sec. There that goes. Okay, so the what was I doing? Oh yeah, so I need to create some structure in CSS that I can use that will apply just to that article div. And to apply to it as an ID, you use the hash mark here. So hash mark article. This is now a special selector that's only going to apply to an element that has ID equals article. If this was a class, you would do it with a period. But in this case, I'm doing it with an ID, so I don't need that selector. Okay, so like I said, the problem is that it's too wide. So let's make the width less wide. Let's set the width to something specific. By default, width is just going to be 100%. It's a relative value. It's relative to whatever the container is, in this case the body. And in that case, the body is the same width as the window, so the width is 100% already. But I want to make this something less than 100%. I could give it some percentage. I could say 50%. Let's see how that looks. Again, normal process, make a change, save it, refresh, see if it made the difference you wanted. And that's looking okay. That's pretty, I mean, it's, you know, pretty narrow, but that's better. You can also set width to other values, like you can use actual exact values. So a pretty intuitive value is a number of pixels. Now this is more salient if you actually know how many pixels wide you already are working with, but let's just try 800 just to pick a number. And there's 800 pixels, that's what that looks like. So that's probably a little bit better. But what a pixel is going to differ depending on the resolution of your monitor and other things. So, you know, that's not always the most useful unit. There's a whole bunch of other distance units you can use in here, like EMs and REMs and VWs and VHs. But for now, we'll just do, you know, we'll just stick with 800 pixels. And that's usually pretty reliable, 800 px. Back when I was learning all this stuff, we would usually think of 800 pixels as the maximum width for something because that's how some people's computers were set up that was the full size of their monitors. 800 by 600 was considered like kind of a range that you should design with that in mind, because that's how a lot of users already a lot of monitors were set to that by default. Back when I was learning things in the ancient times, the late 1900s. So this is yeah, with 800 pixels, it works. But, you know, maybe we don't like the way everything is smushed over to the left, right? So it's sort of like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nice breathing room over, nice negative space way over there, but this little bit right here, that's kind of squeezing the edge, and I don't care for that. So we can do a couple things to move that. One thing is we could just bump it off from the left side by giving it a left margin. So margin hyphen left will give it some value. We can give it some value here, and it'll move it over by that amount. Let's just say 100 px. Keep the units the same. You can mix unit types actually, but it's okay. It's a better idea to keep it safe. And I actually really like this particular layout. I think this is pretty balanced. Of course, that balance is going to change, and there are problems. If you notice, like if I make my window too small, that's, you know, I lose some of that content, or if I make it too big, it doesn't actually look as balanced as it used to. So in a lot of cases, you probably want relative units instead of absolute units like pixels, but you can see the difference I've applied here so far. So that's one way you could do it. And you should always, by the way, when you're dealing with layout, try different widths and see if it still looks okay in whatever width, and you can see this one doesn't look okay at this width. You can even, using the developer tools, you can actually use your browser to emulate different types of phones. So let me pop this out so you can see it. So let's say this, what would this look like on a Samsung Galaxy A51? That's what it would look like on there. And it doesn't look terrible. It looks like the browser actually, this web browser figured this out. Let's see what it would look like on a Samsung Galaxy S8 or higher. Also looks pretty good. These are mobile browsers that understand maximum units, and they do a pretty good job of trying to fit the content into it. Okay, but let's switch back to normal so that we can actually see it. All right, so let me show you one more thing, and this is a more common kind of thing you might want to do, and that's to make this not a absolute unit, but actually relative units, and then put this column that you create in the center of the window, and then that'll be good enough for today. So let me kind of wrap all that up here. Let's give it a width of, let's say, let's do 70%. And you know, there we are back on the left because I haven't done anything else. Again, we want it in the middle, so we want balance left and right. And there's a little trick you can do using margin. And so if you recall what I did here, I said margin left, make that 100 pixels. Margin is also a property where you can set all 4 margins at once. And when I say 4, that means top, right, bottom, and left. And you can say do all of them at once. And you can also say do 2 of them at once. So you can say do the, okay, so if we set the margin, let me do it like this. I'll do it the long way first. So if we set the margin top, we don't actually need a top margin, so we'll set that to 0. We don't need a margin on the bottom, so we'll set that to 0. But we want the margin on the left side to be calculated automatically, and we also want the margin on the right side to be calculated automatically. We don't know how much space there is between the column we created and the side. We just want the browser to figure that out on its own, and it's going to do those both at the same time, and so the result is that the content is going to end up squeezed into a central column. And it's a nicer looking layout like this. So this is going to flow with the window. So as I kind of make the window open and closed, different sizes, it's still going to fit pretty well, except the image, which is already set to a specific width. But everything else kind of flows in a way that's pretty responsive. And this is a good way to do it. An easier shorthand for this, and this is really a technique, not even a setting, is to set it like this, margin 0 auto. That's just a shorthand way of writing the same thing. So the 0, the first value, when you give margin 2 values, the first one applies to the top and the bottom, and the second one applies to left and right. So that's what's happening there. So same thing, and pretty decent layout. Not too fancy, but for this project, this is plenty. I wouldn't worry about getting farther into it. All right, so I do see I'm over an hour, and I do have a few of you watching, though, so if there's still something that you would like for me to show you, then please tell me. Otherwise, I'm about to wrap things up pretty soon. I will just point you to kind of where you can learn more if you want to, and if you want to get into really more interesting things with CSS layouts, there is quite a lot out there. So, of course, HTML and the CSS tutorials to learn the basics, but what's often really helpful is a lot of the layout stuff in particular can be a lot of drudgery. It can be you can spend a lot of time dealing with floats and margins and trying to get things pixel perfect. And a lot of times it's useful to start with what's called a CSS framework as your kind of foundation and then build on top of that. And those the CSS frameworks will do a lot of that hard work for you. They've already done a lot of that hard work for you, and you just have to kind of build on top of it. Now you kind of have to already know what CSS is doing and what it's for to really benefit from that. But once you've got that, it can save you a ton of time, and I like it. So W3 Schools, they actually have provided a framework. It's called w3.css, and here's their tutorial explaining how to use it. And as you notice here, they are saying that this is an alternative to Bootstrap. Bootstrap is still probably the most popular framework out there. Bootstrap was actually created by some people at Twitter. So it's another very popular. Bootstrap is a very popular CSS framework, and it gets you lots of nice little design elements that you've definitely seen on the web. Like, it is used very frequently, and it's great. It has a grid system for doing layout stuff, and it explains how to use it here. I also like Spectre. So Spectre is the one I'm using for something I'm working on right now. It's a little bit lighter, a little bit less fancy, but it works fine, and it's quick, it's lightweight, it's smaller than Bootstrap, so it doesn't take as much memory out of your for your user to have to download. So I like Spectre. There's another one I've seen. I haven't used it really, but right now I use it for one thing. Something called Cutestrap. And let's see, yeah, Cutestrap is another thing. It's kind of like Bootstrap, but lightweight, and it's kind of, I guess it's trying to be cute. I guess that's its thing. So you can see about it. It has a lot of explanations here. So there's different options out there, but you kind of have to get the basics first before you can really benefit from a layout tool like a CSS framework. Bootstrap also has a JavaScript framework. So usually when people build a site with Bootstrap, they're using both of those as the way to develop their front end. Okay, so that was kind of more just FYI. If you want to look into that, you certainly don't have to for these projects, but if you want to learn more about web design, that's where I would say to go next. W3.css is pretty good. I haven't used it myself, but I've had students use it successfully, and I also really like Bootstrap, of course, although Bootstrap is sort of so common, it's almost like a cliche. Spectre's a little different, so I like Spectre. Okay, so that's a lot covered today, and I kind of talked through a lot of it, but hopefully I showed you some things that were helpful. Let me, I'll just share this in case you want to look at it. Here's the web page I've been working on today. So I put this here in the Twitch chat, and I'll put it in live stream chat and Discord as well. Here's the I'm sharing that because if you want to see this again, or if you want to see how I did something that you see here, then all you have to do is view the source. You go Control U in your browser, or right click maybe and view page source. And then this is what I just wrote, and you can see it in your browser just like I'm seeing here. Remember, I recommend Chrome or Firefox for today. So I'm in Chrome right now. Control U shows me the source. That's what, I mean, you can't edit this, but you can see what I did, and you can copy and paste it into your own code. And you're welcome to copy and paste this code if you want. Okay, so I am wrapping up then. If you have any questions, as usual, then please use the troubleshooting channel in Discord, or send me an email, I guess. I will not be live streaming tomorrow because this what I'm doing right now. This is day 4 of the week, and then next week I will probably do one stream on Monday. That might be it, because next week is really just the final things. It's essentially finals week for the class. But I'll do at least one more stream to talk about kind of what's going on and what you need to do to wrap things up for this class. And then I'm also going to be grading tomorrow and Saturday, so you'll see some more videos and things coming to you through Canvas. Okay, so with that, I'm going to kind of start wrapping things up here. Thanks for watching. Had a few more viewers than normal, so I hope that was helpful, and I will see you later. Let me know if I can help with your project, and have a good weekend.